So without further ado, I'll introduce our beautiful panelists I'm lucky to be moderating today. So we have Kieran Warwick here, co-founder of Illuvium. Welcome to the panel. And Maxime Bucaille, project manager at Atari. And we'll be a three-man panel. So guys, just to break the ice, what do you think? You know, since that panel is kind of NFT and blockchain, what's kind of that initial thought here with regards to NFT unlocking new stuff in the gaming industry? Because gaming is way older than NFT, so you know, in that kind of a long evolution, how do we see as a kind of a pivotal anchor? Kieran goes first on this one.
Sorry, to centralize gaming in general. I think I missed.
Yeah, and like what opportunity, what impact can NFT have on gaming?
So I mean, it can have it can and already is having a huge impact on the way that players think about gaming in the future, and as I said, even now, play to earn is a huge draw card. It's something that I believe is flying under the radar right now, and simply, you know, there's obviously we're gonna get into it and start talking about custody of assets and things like that, which are massive game changers. But for me, it's the ability to say to someone, would you like to play a game for the next 4 or 5 hours? You might have fun, you know, or would you like to play a game, have some fun, but also earn a decent amount of money to the point where you can actually earn enough money to earn a living? And so that's the big draw card for me. It's the play to earn side of things, but there's obviously a ton of other stuff that comes with utilizing the blockchain and NFTs to make gaming just a much more interactive, a much more player controlled experience all the way through.
Okay, and do you have any insights on that, Max, on the kind of the impact of that new kid on the block in the gaming scene?
Yeah, I mean, totally agree with Kieran. I think, NFT within gaming, it's all about unlocking value for the users. I mean, gaming, when cryptocurrencies were coming up, it's been using digital currencies. It's one of the applications that's been using digital currencies for the longest time. And that's just talking digital currency or turned into crypto. But now that you have NFTs, you can see that you can do much more than just, digital coins in games, which we looking for value within those games, within places, with actual skins and elements of the games. And it's really a new way, I think, that we'll get into. But, you have people spending their time 10 hours a day on games and not extracting any value out of that. And I think that's really where blockchain comes in and really creates strong value for those people.
Okay, interesting. And when I want to take the rebound here, and you said that it helps the users and that digital currencies were, kind of native first landing spot for NFTs to be in. One thing that is kind of relevant in the news lately is how these kind of Epic versus Apple Store kind of a sequel here. Do you think like NFT could be an NFT or blockchain as a whole can be kind of a key to kind of unlocking that monopoly for these game studio, for these app stores that are kind of taking a lot of money from players and studios alike?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've been gaming since I'm a kid, and it's really a one-way. It used to be really a one-way marketplace, right? You go into a game, you buy directly from the game creator, you get some assets, and then you build up your persona, you you grow to some levels, but then there's really no secondary marketplaces for those games. It's really a one-way market where right now with NFTs, if we get interoperability between games and everything can be built on the same blockchain platform, you'll be able to not only buy directly, not only from the source, but buy your assets from different players and be able to actually, like, once you're done with the game or once you're done with a certain asset, get out of it and get some monetary value out of it. You have people spending 10 hours building a persona up to some levels, and at the end of the day, they used to have to go onto some black markets to sell their game, or used to have to go to no exit value. And right now, what we're trying to create is just spending all that time. You build a persona to level 100, you're done with it. Kieran wants to go and play with his friends that are level 100. How can, instead of buying it directly from the game producer, can he go to me and buy my persona and really be able to, first of all, let me get an exit strategy out of it, and for him get a cheaper value to be able to compete with his friends.
Yeah, that for sure has been a long time threats, the kind of account trading, black market, and it's been a forever, since online games, since the dawn of online games, there's been fraud in black market accounts trading.
And that's that.
Yes,
that sort of thing. To directly answer your question, I do think that could have a major impact on the revenue of the iOS store and the Play Store, because that's exactly what these centralized organizations are trying to stop. Even down to the point where the developer can't offer any of these services, even if they wanted to, these secondary markets. So absolutely, if play to earn and decentralized gaming starts taking off, they should either start looking into it themselves or start working on strategy, because it's not going away.
No, it's not going away. And it's something that we want, that players wants to get solved.
Yeah.
But when it comes to studio, one thing that I find interesting to discuss here is there a way studios can see NFTs as a threat for their models, and the fact to have a better ownership for their players and allow for a secondary market? Is there a mechanism where it cuts or hinders the sales of these new disposable skins in the future? And yeah, it is an NFT integration in some ways eating game studios' lunch?
It definitely has the potential to. So in our case, the way that we typically, how you would set up your in-game revenues in a centralized game is you have your main entity, and you have a title or multiple titles off the back of that studio that they're producing, and all of those in-game purchases will go back to that centralized organization. And in Illuvium's case, the way that we've set our tokenomics up, 100% of our in-game purchases, whether that be trading on the exchange or shards that get cured inside our game, skins, accessories, whatever it is, it all goes 100% back to the players and the people that are staked in the platform. And that's a very, very scary prospect for a centralized game. If all of a sudden they were only getting a certain percentage, in our case, we've got the treasury that has 10% of the total tokens, which would be staked in the protocol. So what that means is we're only receiving essentially 10% of the revenue from the game. If you went and tell that to Riot or Blizzard or whatever, it's a very, very scary prospect. But where it's super advantageous is for the players. And at the end of the day, the power needs to go back to the players, and because really they're the ones, or at least if it doesn't completely shift over to the players, we need to reach more of an equilibrium between the two to ensure that it's not just monopolized by that centralized entity.
Yeah, I think Steam
Absolutely.
is a good example of the ecosystem, isn't it?
Sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because obviously with Steam, we saw that players wanted to be able to trade these skins. They wanted to be able to either take money out in some way, and unfortunately there was kind of like partially illicit or like not very secure means for them to do it on third-party sites. Obviously, so we saw some better quality ones come out, like OP skins and stuff like that. But yeah, it was like you have this closed, centralized system like Steam, where all of that user money just constantly flows around it. Obviously, there's advantages and disadvantages. On one hand, you probably end up, I don't know, like me, spend all your money in your Steam account on other games. So if you do sell some items that you had, then you end up buying games with them. So that is one system where it's not too disadvantageous, I suppose, but like that is kind of one of the core principles, isn't it, of NFTs or digital assets, that especially game items, that yes, we actually own them, and ownership means being able to trade them and get money for them if you want it.
Mm-hmm. And I think just the lengths that people go to over the last 10 to 20 years, you know, people meeting up on street corners to do over-the-counter deals with World of Warcraft gold and all this kind of stuff. It, you know, and black market stuff and the dark web. People have been trying to get around these centralized entities for decades. And with blockchain and NFTs, it finally gives us the power to be able to create these gaming ecosystems where the players can sidestep this. So it's very, very new, but it's going to be very interesting over the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I think one of the other, if I'll jump in again, one of the other kind of aspects of NFTs that really excited me when we first started kind of hearing and thinking about them end of 2017, 18, was like interoperability. And it's a beautiful word, like interoperability. It just rolls off the tongue. And it's like, but it's one stage of NFTs that I don't really think has been explored that much. So obviously, like in gaming and in crypto, we have this concept of the metaverse, and like kind of strangely, like metaverse and blockchain means something slightly different from metaverse and games. But they're both terms that are being used like at the same time. But interoperability and like the use of an NFT in one game and then using it in another is definitely something that I found really, really interesting and appealing. But I think given that it's so early and still is so early with game NFTs and everything, like you need all of these companies and all of these projects to establish themselves before they can start linking up. And obviously, I mean, we've already seen it start to happen, but it's definitely like happening. And then we see bigger brands coming in, obviously, and they're going to want to take like a piece of the pie. And so, yeah, hopefully we do start to see items that not only are being used in one game, but then can transition into another game. And then not only does that add loads of layers of value, but also just brings in a whole different demographic of gamers. So you might have FPS gamers that are trading items with strategy gamers. So yeah, it's exciting. Yeah.
We'll start by having NFTs in one game. That'll be a major milestone, because like as we all described, it can be somewhat of a threat for decentralized game studio. How do we pierce that ceiling? How do we get in a position where they don't all team up to blockade the NFT space? And kind of what's that half step maybe that can be done today to kind of, you know, trying to get these cogs rolling and these big players starting to embrace? Do you have any insights on that?
I'll take this one. I think, working for Atari. Yeah, I think, working for Atari, which is a traditional gaming company, and we decided really early on we've been investing in blockchain gaming starting in 2017, actually, but it's really tough to dip your toes in when you come from a traditional gaming background to know what's the best platform to build your games, what's going to work, what are the assets. So as a brand, we started early on, just like licensing our brand to be in as many platforms as possible, such as the Sandbox, Decentral Games. And I think it's just a first mover advantage. Like you're saying now, of course, we're not a big game studio compared to some of the bigger players out there. But the fact that you're saying, Ubisoft is coming and very strongly investing in the space, investing in a lot of startups, I think it's still a bit too early to tell because people don't know yet what platform is going to be the strongest. But obviously, at some point, you're going to see a paradigm shift. Right now, everyone's sitting on a sweet position where they don't really need to give back power to the user. They don't really need to give some of their market share. We're moving into that direction. We believe that it's going to make an impact and it's going to bring much more user growth than traditional gaming platforms. So I think it's still, it's in the building phase, but it's going to happen very quickly. Once one big game studio builds a game where players actually see the value and you see the massive user growth, then it's just going to keep on its own very quickly. So, getting interested in the technology, making some strategic investments in it, testing the waters to see what works is the phase we're at right now. And it will going to grow exponentially once everything unlocks.
Yeah, and I think one thing that perhaps like the smaller startups like Reality Gaming Group, we were in a good position where we could take on a lot of risk because we were in a space that was super innovative. But when you're in a more traditional company, you might be more like conservative and a bit more cautious about how you're approaching these things. But I felt like we were very fortunate to kind of launch game NFTs at a time when they weren't really even NFTs. They weren't even fungible. The first NFTs we made were actually ERC20 tokens. So they weren't actually NFTs. And that just came about maybe like 3 to 6 months after we'd created the first of our ERC20 NFTs. Well, not NFTs. I don't even know what to call them back then. Just tokens. That was it. So one of the benefits that I think we definitely had was as a smaller company or as a startup, we could just take risks. So one of the things that we took a risk on was putting our NFTs into our mobile game. And there is a risk with that because obviously if you upset Apple or the Google, those as a mobile game, those are your two biggest platforms. And if you were to upset them and get yourself banned off the platform, that's very, very bad. But obviously one of the things we did was take on a risk, obviously spoke to people at these different platforms, but given the size of them, you can never actually guarantee the information that you're getting because it might be just an opinion of someone that works there that everything's okay. But we took the risk and had NFTs that you could use in game. So we had guns, weapons that you could use in our augmented reality combat game. And then these would be traded on the Ethereum mainnet as well. So we had to take a risk there. But as I said, because we were a smaller company, it got approved, and it might be that we were just small enough to slip under the cracks, or somebody who was reviewing it was just like, hey, I like NFTs as well, I'm gonna put it through. But yeah, it was definitely like a risk there for us, so I can understand why an even bigger company would be cautious.
Yeah, and you mentioned mobile games, and what that made me think. It made me think that that the gaming space is somewhat wide. There's different genres, different types of platforms, and what I'm thinking is there a genre or a type of games that you see kind of would be a better first stepping stone for NFTs to gain that that kind of a snowball effect within the industry?
I mean, I'm a little bit biased in that we're developing a collection-based game, but NFTs, they pretty much started with CryptoKitties. Obviously, then they started getting worldwide attention with things like CryptoPunks, and then you have Hashmas and all that kind of stuff. And it's all around this rarity and collection-based things that people are doing. And so for us, the biggest opportunity that I saw was building a functional collection game where you're not just collecting something and sitting on it and hoping that it inflates in value. you're literally using a functional NFT where, in our case, if it's a super rare one that is powerful in the game, you can then utilize that in your team and then effectively earn yourself more ILV token or Ethereum. And so it takes it from being just your typical collection type game, which are amazing. I've got many collections myself, but we wanted to go that one step further and just make it a functional NFT. And so that for me, it would be collecting, but I honestly think that there's a use case for all genres of gaming to go to NFTs for sure.
What do you think,
Yeah,
Max?
absolutely. I think any kind of game that applies to some rarity in your collectibles is definitely the best use case. You also want to think about assets that have a high potential of turnover. I think that's where it becomes interesting. Like items that can be very fully traded within games that are necessities for some of the users. You want to see kind of volume in terms of transactions and exchanges of those items. But that can fit most games, I would say, today. So the opportunity is kind of endless. I think you'll see big platforms that came up. For example, Sorare, the French platform that did the gaming, the kind of fantasy trading cards, did one of the largest Series A in France. That's just a pure collectible game, which is very interesting. But I think you can take it, as Kieran said, like take a step further. Have those NFTs not only be cards that you're playing against, but really like a full perk for when you're a persona in RPG games or things like.
Yeah,
Okay.
completely agree. I definitely think that there's like a genre, there's perhaps like genres that are slightly more suited in gaming to NFTs. So as we said, like things where you collect stuff that is considered valuable and want to hold on to or retain it. And also things like was mentioned was like trading cards for sports. I think like trading cards for sports, like we've said that they don't have a utility or it's not a game almost, but with the fantasy element, obviously that is like a big game where if you can collect the best team and you can pit it up against other people who've got these teams, then if you can win prizes and other things like that, it's definitely like a game element to it, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yes, and we named the crypto kitties earlier on, and that ties back to a good audience question that I have here. We all know that CryptoKitty was the first one on the NFT side, and became popular for an NFT play, right? But when it comes to popularity, it wasn't even 1% of like some of these big games that we all heard of. And it was enough though to completely clog the Ethereum network, and just kind of go downhill from there because you couldn't use it more. And if you want to be able to resell these kitties, you need people to be using the platform. So that leads to that question is, once there's going to be like one of these top games kind of starting to be embracing that, do we see any kind of limitations in terms of transaction TPS, transaction per second, or is there kind of is the piping, the infrastructure ready for that, or is it not yet? And it might be one of the drivers where these bigger studios don't want to adopt it. What do you think, Kieran?
Yeah, so when we first started looking, and this is going back in September of last year, when we started thinking, okay, what sort of genre of game do we want to make? We decided to go with a game that had quite a few player interactions. If you're in the game, you're probably going to be doing an on-chain action every 2 or 3 minutes. And when we first started looking, layer 2 solutions were out there, but they were very much in their infancy. And that was the biggest blocker that we saw. We were trying to work out, how do we do this on mainnet? We weren't at a stage where we were ready to trust these layer 2s. But then it was like, how do we get around when someone's wanting to capture something? It's sitting there and your MetaMask transaction is loading for 5-10 minutes, it's not the experience. You're not going to be able to get your mainstream gamer to come across to a decentralized on-chain game built on Ethereum layer 1 simply because of all of those transaction speeds. It would be too clogged. And so we looked at it and we literally said, if this isn't solved, then we can't do this, and I'm sure that, I would love to hear Max's opinion on this, but I'm sure these larger studios that are looking at it for the first time, that's a massive blocker. It almost to the point where you go, well, I can't create a game. Now that we have layer 2s, we're building on Immutable X, which solves all of those transaction speeds and the minting costs and other stuff that's associated with playing a game on the blockchain. And so it actually works now. But go back last year, and it would have been a struggle.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's two questions. I think the first question is, how much are you willing to have some centralized aspect and some decentralized aspect? So we looked into a lot of games where everything was built on Unity, and the only real aspect of blockchain would be at the moment of having the choice how do you transfer your assets, and so kind of just seeing it as a marketplace. As Kieran is saying, at the time, I think you also needed to think about, when you think about blockchain and gaming, it's not just how can players extract value, but how can players bring value. And so, the biggest community out there for developers is definitely Ethereum. And so started looking a lot more into that blockchain than others, because user-generated content, having the options of not only us creating assets, people buying them and reselling them, but also the aspect of any player coming in and building assets for the game is very important. So the big question, I think, still remains, like, what is the balance between having a very efficient network and having a very strong network of community and builders? That's where we had to make the main decision. With now the layer 2 solutions that came up, we're looking a lot into Matic, for example, which is now Polygon. That's kind of solving a lot of the question marks, because you have, on that one hand, still a strong developer community that can bring user-generated content to your games, but also a very easy and quick way to transact and cheap, because when you're thinking, is it expensive for players? It's not only expensive for players, it's also expensive for developers. We had games where we deployed thousands of NFTs, and there was a burning process at the end, and just the cost to burn one single NFT was $6, $7, $30 for some cases. And when you have 1,000 of them to burn at the end, it's a cost also for the game developer. So that still is a big question. I think we're getting solutions right now that are being able to fix it.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, it's for sure exciting to have these layer 2 on Ethereum, because as you said, it's the largest community, but we want to be able to have blockchain games. And that thought that Kieran had last year of saying, I for sure cannot do that, is a limitation, and also an easy dismissal for these bigger studios that says, blockchain is not ready. Just swipe it off, because they're able to say blockchain is not ready, not thinking of it. And it's good that Atari kind of went heads down a little bit more on the drawing board, even knowing that. And one thing that that I want to know from the three of you guys is there any kind of upcoming trend or growing trend that you see that excites you currently? I'll start with you, Jake.
Well, yeah, there's quite a lot of them. I suppose one thing that ties in with the point about how players can bring value. So not only how they can take value away from a project, but how can they contribute to it. So it is this idea of these metaverses. So, for example, there's places like Decentraland, obviously, and the Sandbox is one as well. And I think the Sandbox is a good example of how they're able to bring in bigger brands that just want to dip their toes into the water by getting into having like a land and having an experience and having NFT items that people like anyone here could build with Vox Edit or whatever else. And I think that trend, we've seen it with Roblox and we've seen it with Minecraft and we've seen it with other platforms where players that can build their own experiences and monetize that are really, really dedicated and enthusiastic and committed to that platform. So for sure, that's one thing that I find really exciting as a trend. I think the other one from our own involvement as well with the recent Floyd Mayweather NFTs. So one of the things that we have as an incentive for NFT owners is that they can enter to win physical prizes. And I think this, again, works really well with sports and sports brands because, you know, NHL teams could give specific owners of their NFTs real world incentives. So it could be like jerseys, it could be match day exclusive tickets or meet and greets or ride the Zamboni as it goes across the ice at halftime. So I think those two for me are particularly interesting, that you've got this metaverse trend where people are able to create NFTs and use them, which is all part of it. And again, interoperability, that beautiful word. And then the other one is the tying of physical merchandise or physical prizes with NFTs, so that people who might not be so interested in the digital, but are very committed and enthusiastic fans about the physical, they'll be brought into this industry, but like in a very enjoyable way. So I think those two for me are definitely exciting.
How about you, Max?
On my end, definitely 100% agree with Jake. We're very, very bullish on metaverses. We have a lot of land, for example, on Sandbox. We recently built games into Decentraland, and we're now months ago that we'll be building our own metaverse. Because if you look at the history of games, and I think for Atari especially, it's really interesting because you have games that are more recent, just as Roller Coaster Tycoon, but also legendary game IPs, just as Asteroids, Pong. And it's crazy to see that the game, you know, was created in the 80s, and that's the only content that was ever created from Atari. But the game is bigger today because of all the user-generated content. Right now, the only monetization for all those people building on top of the game or interacting in a more interesting way with the game is kind of streaming. That's the only way they can really get value out of it. But the game is so much bigger than what it was just created at the beginning, and the experience that today gamers can have and just game enthusiasts can have by following those other players, creating their own content, and finding new hacks in the games and new way to interact with it. That's really, I think, what's going to take it to the next step, because as much as, you know, you can create a good game in-house, most of the interesting content from a game actually comes from the gaming community, and how do they exploit it? How do they build on top of it? What do they create from it? So having those kind of like open worlds where I think the big problem today is still that there's not the best tools to create as much as you can, or the experience is a bit laggy, the servers are not as strong. But if we can get all of that to work super well, and it's what we're going to be aiming to do with our metaverse, that's really going to be the massive trend, right? In my opinion.
And lastly, you, Kieran, what trend currently growing or upcoming makes you tick?
I think the in-game yield is the biggest one. I touched on it earlier before. We portioned off 10% of our total token supply for in-game yield. That's how much importance we're putting on it. To give you an idea, that's $64 million that we're going to be issuing in-game yield over, you know, the first 3-year period of our game being out there. All it takes is, you know, and there's already a couple of other games out there that are doing the exact same thing. There's probably 10 to 20 titles that are being built that have very similar tokenomics to us. So you're talking about getting up to numbers of nearly $500 million that we're offering in a market that is relatively untapped in my eyes. You're talking, there's maybe 250,000, 300,000 decentralized gamers right now. There's 3 billion gamers in the world. If they, it's an education process that we need to go through to get people to understand. And it's also not just educating people on, yes, there's this massive amount of yield that you can earn if you play these blockchain-based games. They need to be of the same quality as mainstream games in order for people to even look at them. They might. It's the exact same thing as people hear, oh, crypto. No, it's too confusing. It's too hard for me to understand. That's what's happening right now. The one thing that people do understand, though, is playing a good game. And I think once developers in this space show that we can create the same quality titles, plus there's the added benefit of this massive amount of in-game yield that all of us are offering, it's going to cause a landslide, because people are going, very similar to what happened in DeFi, and that exploded. People were sick of depositing into their bank account and earning 1% interest when they can go and earn 10% interest if they go into something like Aave. I expect the exact same thing to happen with decentralized gaming.
Well, making a fun game, a quality game, is for sure important when it's a noble goal when you're creating a game, actually. And funnily enough, there's a lot of criticism saying that CryptoKitties wasn't even funny. As popular as it was, it wasn't even fun to play. But one thing I want to loop, though, is on Jake's trend, because it was literally bullseye on some stuff that we do at Wonder Gaming, like that kind of making NFTs more useful, or bringing utility as a value driver instead of just a collectible aspect, through that super fandom status, as you said, for example, having a NHL sponsored NFT that allows you to go Zamboni at your at a game. That's kind of value generating. That's a value driver for a digital asset, and I'm happy that you mentioned it, because that's something that we've also identified. And you took NHL as an example, but we've kind of secured a deal with NHL last week about that. So I just found it interesting to point it out, and to kind of further support that thesis. So
nice.
Exciting.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's super exciting, because again, like from a completely just individual point of view, like not a business orientated one, like this is and NFTs are a new way for people and brands to deliver value and experiences and fun to people. Like the whole concept of everything beyond us just eating and sleeping is for fun, right? And some kind of enjoyment. So whenever people kind of say to me like, oh, why tokenize this, or why have NFTs, or it's just a picture of this, and like part of it is that like we have a new avenue to deliver entertainment to people. And like when we bring in brands and big brands, they have so much to offer and to deliver to fans. They just struggle with new and exciting ways to do it. And NFTs are a new and exciting way for brands to deliver content to fans. So like, I know we're all here working on really exciting things, and there's a lot more to come. So yeah, it's a good place to be.
I want to, shed the light on a more funky topic, and kind of, pick whoever's brain will want to get involved on this one. Maybe it's going to be Jake, because he likes these, metaverse and interoperability kind of things. But like, we talked about gaming genre earlier before, and there's something that always kind of stood out to me when thinking of gaming genre, and it was that super unique concept that happened on Twitch in 2017, 2018, where you had that Twitch plays Pokemon kind of era. Did anyone heard of it?
Briefly.
Twitch plays Pokemon, yeah.
Was this just, were they following people live streaming them going around Pokemon hunting?
Yeah, it would be. So if you're familiar, I don't know if we want to go there. I'll give a nutshell, but I won't ask opinion. Then it was a Twitch channel, all right, where it would play the original Pokemon Blue on Game Boy, all right, but it would read the commands from the chat. So the chat would say up, left, and it was kind of the chat was playing and see how it would progress. And I thought that was interesting, but also, due to the nature of like community of cryptocurrencies / NFTs and kind of the community aspects of kind of having that community decide the fate of the Ash character in the game. I thought it would be kind of a funky gateway to open and see what you think. Like if there's a kind of a new era of social gaming, but where the social part kind of controls, like you have that socialized character in the game. But
yeah, I think there was definitely like social games like Among Us and Fall Guys, like those in particular came out partially of the pandemic, of people wanting to feel like connected to other people, even if it was like a nameless other like minion or whatever. Like at least you knew that was a real person playing somewhere in the world. So there was definitely like that, like community side gaming is definitely something. Like I remember I used to play a game called Yarn, which is on GameSpy or something, where you used to have to write a bit of a story and then everyone would vote on the story, and then it would be you wrote out a huge long exciting tale, often very vulgar and inappropriate, but obviously like that was the good old 90s or the 2000s.
And then you mint one good in an NFT and everyone has his share.
There we go. Yeah. And I mean, we've already seen it. We're kind of going away from games, I suppose, but with artwork, like you can have physical artwork or digital versions where multiple people can own a portion of it. And that, again, is quite exciting, that people can be so involved in just, one item. It can be split up and the enjoyment and value of that spread. So,
how do you say the game was called? I'll just note it down on my out of curiosity. Yarn? How do you spell
Yarn? Yeah, like YARN. So like spinning a yarn.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sweet.
That was an old school game. Yeah.
Anything you guys want to add on that funky thought, Kieran or Max?
Oh, I mean, I do briefly remember, I think one of my brothers was talking to me about that social movement that was happening, and it was pretty crazy. I think someone then made a long YouTube video explaining everything that went down in that social experiment. It's along those lines, but essentially we've come out in Illuvium and we're completely decentralized. And so what that means is it's similar sort of construct in that the players are able to literally submit new character submissions, and really anything inside our game is modifiable by the players and the people who are staked in the protocol. So very, very early on, and again, for centralized games, this would be insanity. It's literally handing power of all decision making over to your community and saying, "Go for it. See what you want to do." And so we've set our entire gaming ecosystem up like that, and our community runs the protocol, and that in itself is definitely an experiment. It hasn't been done at length yet. There's a lot of games that are starting off now as a decentralized autonomous organization, but there's not many that are really in play yet that have launched. So I think that's going to be super interesting to see just to what level are people going to give that autonomy back to the players, and what's going to happen, because there's going to be some very, very interesting things that happen to games in terms of the governance process.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kieran. I think with DAOs, just if you look in terms of esports right now, you have those big private teams who are, highly supporting gamers and making all the decisions for them. But you could definitely see like
Yeah,
It's
I
almost
was hoping he would come back with all the feet kind of catching up. But, so I'll loop on something then uh, that piggybacks on what you said, Kieran, and kind of having the community decide what happens in the game. Because there's a trend that I'm seeing that emerges in the gaming space, and it's the trend, the kind of I call it the back to old school trend. So you have like all these games that they have updates over the years, and then there's kind of a major concentration of players that they're all nostalgic of like that one patch when the game was popular, and they all want to play like in the days because they think it wasn't as good as before. And you've seen games kind of release kind of old school version of their games. I'm thinking of WoW, RuneScape. It's like it's getting a trend. It's a recurring trend at that point. But what happens though is, since it's community driven, that shift. What I've seen these two studios do is let the players that wanted that to happen and that have accounts in these servers or sub games decide which patch to incorporate and how the game should evolve from that point on. So it's kind of a democracy to say, hey, should we add that new patch thing, or how should we do it? And it makes me think of how these decentralized network like Bitcoin and Ethereum, how they are evolving when they come in with ERCs, right? There's proposals for making, I want to improve Ethereum, that's how it should be, and become somewhat of a political campaign. So that's a trend that I see being close in how the games evolve. You have a thought, Kieran, on that kind of
yeah, 100%. Where my mind's sort of going back to is like 2016 Ethereum being forked, and you had the Ethereum Classic. They're sitting there, they're like, we're not going anywhere, we like our protocol the same. And yeah, I definitely see it, the potential in 6 months time or 12 months time post launch. Our council decides to do something crazy that just so happens to get to pass the vote. If that happens, we could have a revolt, and we could have a fork of our game where you have Illuvium 1 and then you have Illuvium Classic and you have the new Illuvium, and you've got two player bases, two different sets of features. They utilize some of the same characters. I don't know. But
then once every 4 years they compete in the Illuvium Olympics.
Maybe, and and that's exciting to me. I don't look at that and from the person who or one of the co-founders of this, I literally consider myself now just a core contributor. We've got 80 people that are working in our DAO. They're all world-class people that have been working around the world, and I'm happy to see that happen. And especially from the community standpoint as well. I think these guys have been with us from the very beginning. Their input has been amazing throughout. I have absolutely no worry whatsoever to hand over power to the community, but does that mean that some crazy things couldn't happen? Absolutely not. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's excitingly dangerous, I suppose, if you handed the reins over to the community, because you're going to have factions wanting different things. And we talk about Ethereum obviously forking, and it wasn't even that long ago that we were having the big Bitcoin debate about block size. I almost forgot that happened, but one of the things with obviously this tech going so quickly is so much stuff and so much drama happening. But yeah, I mean, when you think back to, I think it was 2018 when the block size debate was going on, and Bitcoin.
What a time that was.
Yeah, and that was a crazy time. Again, that was 80% drops and then all the way back up and everything. But the key part of it, if you put prices aside, which is difficult for some people, but it was about the philosophy of it all. And again, that's what we're kind of touching on here with community governance and community control. All of these different cryptocurrencies have been economic projects and tests. I remember when I first got in, you could make your own cryptocurrency by going to a website and saying, I want this script mining, I want this proof of work or proof of stake, this how many coins, 0.1 Bitcoin, generate, and you could create your own currency. And I think the same thing will be happening with blockchain games and decentralized games as well, where like some models are going to test like giving it totally to the community, and it's going to be so exciting to see what happens. Yeah, it's all very, very exciting, basically. But yeah.
So Max, we dropped you for a quick while. Do you still have your threads in thought, or?
Yeah, no, my train of thought was, jumping back on what Kieran was saying about, DAOs and how really our community can have an impact. I think you can do it with esports very strongly. I think that's a very good example of how, get some people to really build a strategy for a really strong esports team and start making an impact decision on what that player is going to do. I think in terms of self-game development, you have to keep some kind of balance between, if you want to be differentiating, you can't listen to all your community because there's a lot of overlap in communities. So I think, it's a balance between building your own products, building your own tools, and letting the community have a strong impact. Just as a closing note, I think, I'm really interested in what's going to come in the next 2 years, because I think right now we have a lot of people coming into blockchain gaming that are just there because, it's NFTs, it's crypto, you can make money, you can earn a real living out of it. And we haven't really able to capture the true gamers. And I think the next 2 years are going to be the most interesting. Once a bit the money craze phase kind of fades away in a little bit, we're going to see the actual real gamers, real builders coming into these games. And that's really when you're going to start seeing what's working, what's not working, what are the good platforms out there. And I think that's going to be the most interesting in the next 2 years, if I can put that as a closing remark.
That's scary though, because that's like that's bear market. Basically, what you're asking for is a bear market. Only the real people who actually care enough to stay around and aren't doing the quick cash grab, which is all of us, obviously. That's the period when we all basically just suffer for our art and make sure that we're still making NFTs, still experimenting with different chains, and just trying to find a way to make it all work for the players, really.
The Thanos purge.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm kind of glad that the NFT crash, or supposed crash, has happened, because it means that maybe we get a little bit longer before the big juggernauts start going, okay, now it's settling down, it's not so volatile, let's step in there. That crash might have bought us an extra 6 to 12 months. But as Max is saying, it's inevitable. If this starts blowing up, at a similar rate to what DeFi has done in itself, which it certainly is, these gaming studios are coming, and they're not bringing. This is the thing that's, we're in a bit of a silo right now with blockchain games. These guys don't bring teams of 10, 20 people. You're talking 300 to 1,000 people in these studios, and they don't just build one title, they build 5 titles, and one of them is going to be a hit and 4 miss, and they don't care because they've got bundles and bundles of cash. It's just super important for the guys who are here now early to focus on quality, I think, because there's only there's a window that we have of opportunity where they're not seeing what is happening here, but once they do, the floodgates will open and the quality games are going to rise to the top, I think.
Quality opens the floodgate. Community is important for content, for participating in revenue, and for unlocking some of these irritating stuff that are currently the gaming space. What an interesting conclusion. Thanks, Max. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Kieran. I was glad, I was honored to be able to, bounce some serious and crazy ideas along this panel. And everyone stay tuned for the rest of the summit. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.